All right, Luke, you have 15 seconds to say something interesting before we start.
Okay. Did you know that... the guy who modernized the design of the Frisbee, after he died, was cremated and turned into a limited line of Frisbees that were given to his family and close friends. That's a true fact.
Okay, well, welcome to the Valley Bible Studies podcast.
You asked to make it interesting. That was the first one that came to mind.
That was weird.
It's a fun fact.
Fun?
It's a fact.
I'll give you that.
It's a fact that
Is that actually true?
Yeah, that's actually true. He's not the guy who actually invented the Frisbee, but he's the guy who, basically came up with the modern design of the Frisbee. Was cremated and turned into...
Do you know what year?
Like 1990s.
So if you have a Frisbee from the 90s...
There's a small chance. They were mostly given, I think, to his family members and close friends.
And there
is a small chance
they
that you own a
framed
Frisbee.
it and put it on the wall?
I guess. Maybe played Frisbee with it. I don't know.
What was his name?
Ed something. I don't remember his last name.
So you're telling me there's family hey, what's that Frisbee doing up on the wall?
That's Uncle Eddie.
That's Uncle Ed.
Right. Yeah, probably.
The kids
either that or they're
kids
legit playing with it outside.
The kids bring friends over and they're like, "Hey, where's the Frisbee on the wall?
Let's go play with Grandpa."
Yeah, no, Steven and his friends took it outside. That's Uncle Ed.
Yeah,
that's kind of
that's a real thing. Now you know.
Yeah, the more you know.
So welcome to the Bible podcast.
Yeah, welcome to the Valley Bible Studies podcast. Excited to be back. Today we are talking about Jeremiah.
That's true.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something super interesting after that. Okay. So to give, historical. So both, if you didn't know this, which I don't know, if you've been listening, you probably do.
If you've listened to any episode before this one, you know what he's about to say.
Luke and I are pretty
dorky.
I was going to say nerdy. I like dorky better. Do I? I don't know. We both like history.
That's true.
And so when we start reading about all these, one, let me put this out there. Luke already knows it, which he and I were talking before we started recording. Wow. Wow.
This is what I do.
Yeah, I know, but still, wow.
Also, for this episode specifically, shout out Daniel, who, Daniel, my brother, also shout out the prophet Daniel, but
sure.
My brother Daniel is my go-to source on anything that happened during the reigns of the kings in Israel and Judah. From, David on down to what we're talking about today, which is the end of the kings. Usually before I even open a book about it, I will consult Daniel, because he just knows this stuff.
Good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know. Good job, Daniel. Does Daniel listen?
Sometimes.
Good job, Daniel. So Jeremiah is often referred to as the weeping prophet.
Yes.
Luke, what does that mean?
It means that he wept. He was sad. You got to specify the question.
Luke,
you had me start with Frisbees from a dead guy. You got to, give me more to work with.
Sure. Okay. What was the content behind him being the weeping prophet?
Okay. That would be the historical context of Jeremiah. So, Jeremiah is the last major prophet before the downfall of Jerusalem.
Major prophet.
Okay. Kind of true, because the downfall of Jerusalem happens in stages. So Ezekiel and Daniel also, they are both prophesying by the time that the last downfall of Jerusalem happens, but Jeremiah is the one that stays there for it. Ezekiel and Daniel are both prophesying from Babylon at that point.
He got to see all of it happen first.
He's in the middle of it as it's happening.
Yeah.
So that by itself would be really bad and probably cause you to be a weeping prophet. But if you look at the history behind Jeremiah, so Jeremiah prophesies during the last generations of the Judean kings.
So we're talking 627 BCE to 580. Something
like that. Yes. The final downfall of Jerusalem is 586 BC.
Correct.
And he lasts until a little after that. Josiah is king at the beginning when he first comes onto the scene. Josiah is a good king by and large. He oversees restoration. He oversees the celebration of certain festivals and feasts for the first time in a long time. He's basically the last good king. And then his son Jehoahaz comes into power, and he's awful, so he gets removed by the Pharaoh. And then his brother, Josiah's second son, Jehoiakim, with an M, becomes king, and he's also awful. I don't remember if he dies or if he gets removed by Babylon.
Babylon rebelled against him.
That's right. Yeah. Like he's the one who rebels against Babylon. He gets taken. So his son, Jehoiakim, also called Jeconiah or just Coniah sometimes. So this is now Josiah's grandson. He becomes king. He's the least bad, I would think. I would argue.
Still wasn't good.
He wasn't good. He's the only one that doesn't like actively rebel against either Egypt or Babylon.
But it's funny because Babylon still captures him.
Babylon still comes in, captures him, and that's when they take the first wave of stuff from the temple. They've already taken waves of slave. I'm pretty sure Daniel is in the first wave when they take Jehoiakim away.
Okay.
But Jehoiakim is when they start raiding the temple after they take him. And then Zedekiah, so Nebuchadnezzar's like, obviously we can't trust Jehoiakim anymore. We can't trust his son or any heir that he would have. We're going to put his uncle Zedekiah. So now we're on our third son of Josiah that's been in charge. Zedekiah is going to be placed kind of as a puppet ruler by Nebuchadnezzar. Spoiler alert, he's the last Judean king. Because Zedekiah decides, I'm going to not pay taxes. So obviously, Nebuchadnezzar's the Babylonian emperor, and Babylon was relatively friendly to many of the entities that they overtook on a political front, in the sense that they would let the leaders who were there stay in power as long as they paid tribute. Well, Zedekiah decides, I'm not going to pay tribute. And once that comes to light, Nebuchadnezzar's like, okay, we've had enough Judean kings. He goes in. This is when the temple and most of Jerusalem is absolutely destroyed, and all of the gold and the silver and the stuff is all taken back. Zedekiah himself is blinded and then taken to Babylon and executed in the public square. Jehoiakim, who is Zedekiah's nephew and Josiah's last living grandson, is actually allowed to live, and it's because he was allowed to live that the royal lineage perseveres, and that's how we eventually get Jesus. All of that to say, things are not good while Jeremiah is prophesying. It's steadily going downhill on a political front, on an economic front, on a social front, and on a religious front, because, remember, Josiah is the last good king. So after he's gone, all of his sons and grandsons who are trying to hold on to
are just the worst. Yeah.
And, like, sure, we'll appeal to Yahweh for help. We're also going to appeal to just about every other god you can think of, because at that point they're grasping for straws, and God basically, one of his main messages through Jeremiah is, if you had just asked me, I probably would have helped you.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what I've been saying since Deuteronomy, when I said, like, if you go into the land and you serve me, I'll help you out. If you had just asked me from the beginning, I would have helped you against Babylon, but you didn't. So...
And the reason the Babylonian Empire was able to get as big as they were, we see the Assyrians are they're losing their power, they're losing a lot of their territory, and so the Babylonian Empire is just growing.
Mm-hmm. But even then, God is in control. And I think, like, if you summarize everything that Jeremiah says in 52 chapters into one idea, it's that God is in control both on the big macro, like, world nations scale, and he's in control of your life specifically. There are a lot of situations over the course of this book where Jeremiah jumps back and forth between how all of this is affecting Judah as a nation and how Babylon as an empire is playing into it. And in those situations, he talks about, like, God is in control. And then he'll jump back and forth between that and here's how it's impacting me, Jeremiah, the person, or the people that are right around me. And still the message is God is in control. So he's in control of the big and the small.
Right. And at the time, Judah was, land of Judah was doing a lot of stuff that they probably shouldn't. They had idolatry. They're worshiping incorrectly. It was the whole, they knew who God was, but they didn't know him.
Well,
does that make sense?
It's from Isaiah that this is said, but Isaiah says these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me.
Exactly.
And that's
Yes.
kind of the summary of the
Correct.
state.
Yeah, they're still having those rituals, but they're not honoring
Their
him
heart's not
correctly.
in it.
Yeah, they're rejecting God, essentially.
Well, and again, they're pleading to Yahweh and also like Molech and also Ishtar and also like
Right.
any god under the sky you can think of.
They were kind of just like
He's one among many instead of being the one true God.
correct.
It's interesting because we do that all the time.
Well, and the applicable statement is this: outward religion, without having an actual obedience, it's worthless.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the person that goes to church without actually being there to serve God, you might as well not go.
Right.
You're not doing it. You're not there. There is no actual purpose of you being there other than having a social appearance.
So, Mark chapters 11 and 12 are Jesus in Jerusalem in the week before his death. And if you look at both of those chapters, like the whole scope of both of those chapters, Jesus is looking around for somebody who is fulfilling their purpose. He doesn't find it in the fig tree, which doesn't have fruit, so he curses it, it dies. And that's kind of a random thing if you don't understand that it's in the context of what he's doing. He's saying, like, I'm looking for somebody to fulfill their purpose of having true faith.
Mm-hmm.
The fig tree didn't fulfill its purpose because it didn't bear right fruit, so it's dead. He also doesn't find it in the people who have turned the temple into a house of merchandise, so he goes in there with a whip and drives them out. He's not just doing that because he's angry. I mean, he is angry, but he's not just doing it because he's selfish. He's doing it because they're not fulfilling their purpose as God's people anymore. That's why he's doing it. And then you have the debates with the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes. All of them have their questions, but none of them are fulfilling their purpose. At the end of Mark chapter 12, he finally finds the person who's fulfilling their purpose. And it's the widow with 2 mites.
Mm.
She puts in all that she has, and she's saying, like, I might not eat today. I might not have somewhere to sleep tonight, but this is yours, and I have true faith in God, so I'm going to give it to you. And at the end of 2 chapters of looking, Jesus finally points her out and makes sure his disciples see her too, and says, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
That's having the kind of faith in God where he's not just one among many other things, he's actually God.
And having faith doesn't mean that, like, because I can guarantee that woman giving her money, everything she had, she was scared.
Yeah.
She had faith, but that doesn't mean, because you have faith doesn't mean that you're not going to be afraid.
Sure.
Jeremiah's
scared.
He was afraid. He thought
book.
he was too young. He thought he didn't have enough or was able to do enough. And what does God tell him? He says, "Don't be afraid. I'm with you."
Also, he's like straight up at risk of losing his life half the time.
Literally, yeah. You look at. I mean, it's when God appointed him, he wanted to be a prophet to the nations. He wanted to uproot all the stuff that was being and tear down all the stuff that was going wrong and what people were doing. He wanted to point that out. He wanted to build and rebuild, and that's a lot. That's a lot to ask for. And he was afraid, but again, God's telling him, don't be afraid. Why? Because I am with you.
Which is the message of, so Jeremiah 29:11 is one of those verses that is really good, but is taken out of context a lot. Like the Philippians 4:13's, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
I cannot stand seeing that in a weight room.
Because that doesn't mean you can lift 200 pounds above your max because God's going to let you. It means you can endure any situation because God's with you. Kind of the same deal with Jeremiah 29:11, which is often, like, it's May, right? This is often a graduation verse and stuff like that. For I know the plans I have for you. That's like the tagline, and it goes on from there, but like plans to give you peace and secure, like all the stuff. 2 verses before that, I think it's like 2 or 3 verses before that, God tells his people, you're going to be enslaved for 70 years.
But I know the plan.
But I know the plan I have for you. And then 2 verses after that, 29:13, you'll seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. So he's not saying, I know the plans I have for you and everything's going to be hunky-dory all the time. He's saying, I know the plans I have for you. Some of the time you're going to really not like it, and some of the time it's going to make no sense. But you will still seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart.
Well, that's at the very beginning of Jeremiah. He says, I knew you before.
Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you.
Yeah. Like, he knows the before, he knows the during, he knows the after. We only know the during. And having faith in God is he knows what's going to happen. I have to let it happen. I have to trust him every step of the way and let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And give him all the glory when it does.
And so, kind of the word picture of that's maybe the most famous. A lot of times, the major prophets especially, the minor prophets too, but the prophets, what'd you say the prophets? A lot of what they do is they're shown visions by God. And sometimes that vision comes in miraculous form, like it's a vision of something that doesn't make sense physically. But sometimes God will literally point out, like, hey, here's this situation, or here's this person doing this thing. That's a metaphor for some spiritual reality as well. And one of the most famous ones of those is Jeremiah 18, where God says, go to the potter's house. And he goes to the potter's house, and he sees a potter making a pot. And he's got clay.
Is that what they make?
That is true.
Okay.
He's got clay, he's spinning it on the wheel, he's forming it into something, and at some point in his forming it into the vessel that he wants to make, he messes up, or the clay does something weird, or whatever, and so he reforms it, like he does the thing that a good potter does. Instead of freaking out, he, like, reforms it back into, like, a blob, and then creates something new out of it. And God's point there is, that's me and Israel. It looks like things are going really badly. And from the present perspective, they are. Like, things are going to be really bad for Israel for the next 70 years. They're going to be enslaved for 70 years. But what I'm doing is I'm allowing them to be warped and allowing them to be sort of crushed down so that I can rebuild them again. That's a lot of times what faith looks like. Faith doesn't look like totally upward trajectory the whole way. Faith looks like ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs, but even in the ups and downs, I'm okay because God's with me.
Yeah. He is the constant.
And I know that he has a greater plan in the future.
He is the constant.
Yes. So that's one of the more famous word pictures from Jeremiah. We've already kind of hit, like, a couple of the highlights, but did you have, like, an outline of the whole thing?
I do. Thank you for asking.
You're very welcome.
All right, so it's kind of split up into different parts. Part 1 is going to be Jeremiah's call, early prophecies. That's chapter 1 through 6. So we see chapter 1 is call, chapters 2 and 3, how Israel is, practicing spiritual adultery, and then the call to repentance, chapter 4 through 6, the warning of invasion from the north, and that destruction is coming. It's happening. Part 2 is going to be the temple sermons and all that. So that's chapters 7 through 10. Jeremiah warns. So in that temple sermon, he warns that the temple will not save them, that it's just a building, that religious rituals cannot replace obedience.
That's another famous line from Jeremiah. He accuses the false prophets of saying peace, peace, when there is no peace.
Right. And so we get to chapter 8. We have that spiritual blindness. People are rejecting the truth. I forget which one it is exactly, but the harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. And then chapter 9 is him, kind of displaying that sorrow.
Yeah. Chapter 8 is kind of when it coalesces to Jeremiah, like, we're too far gone.
Right. And then chapter 10, that's where, idolatry is condemned. Part 3 is the covenant violations and personal sufferings. So chapter 11 is when they break the covenant.
Again.
Yeah.
For like the 100 billionth time.
Yeah. At what point do you just kind of go like, oh, okay. Probably never.
Probably like Jesus' entire life.
True.
Also, like, that's why the cross happened, so.
Yeah. Chapter 13, we see the linen belt illustration. You mind elaborating on that?
Is that the one where he has the linen sash and he has to, like, he goes and puts it in a rock?
Yeah.
And eventually it's worn out and doesn't do anything?
Pretty sure, yeah.
And he comes back, like, he goes and gets it, and God tells him, like, this is what Israel is to me now. Like, it once was a linen sash, but now it has no use.
You're right. And it kind of portrays Judah's corruption.
Yeah.
It
has no use because it's been laying out in
correct.
the sun, not doing what it's supposed to do.
Correct. Chapter 15, we see Jeremiah being, very lonely. And then 18, you already mentioned the potter and the clay.
Yeah.
Chapter 20, we see Jeremiah being persecuted. This is when, this is a very low point for him. The emotions are running high. He's feeling kind of abandoned, but he still trusts in God.
Frequently in this middle part, you get, either the court of whatever king is in charge and or there's a false prophet that's been propped up by the court of whatever king is in charge, has, a public standoff with Jeremiah about, how things are going and whether we're going to be redeemed or not. Those never go well for the false prophets. They always go well for Jeremiah, but the problem is that after the standoff itself goes well for Jeremiah, the court is after him again and his persecution gets worse.
Right. It's one of those where truth always prevails, but power...
But not always in the short term.
But power is always... When those who are corrupt always hold the power, the truth may be revealed, but it's always going to be persecuted.
Yes. By the way, this is a good time to note. I said, whatever king is in power. Jeremiah is confusing because not all of Jeremiah is in chronological order. 1 minute, Jehoiakim is king. The next minute, Zedekiah is king. The next minute, we're back at Josiah at the beginning. The timeline of Jeremiah is weird and wacky, and you kind of just have to roll with it and go based on who the last king that was mentioned was. Anyway.
I'll tell you this. So it all depends on how you learn. I'm sure that there are formats and certain people that have put the book into
Sure.
a chronological setting. If that's how you learn, I would encourage you to look that up. Because
I'll call Daniel. He'll make
as
one. It's fine.
True. As a teacher, the way I structure things are by topic.
Yeah.
So I'll group it by
That's actually how the prophets structure it.
Right. And so I'll go by this empire and this kingdom and this, and they don't always match up chronologically. And there's always a few kids that are like, why don't we just go down a timeline? I'm like, I'd love to, but the Commonwealth of Virginia says no. So
right.
Here we are. But yeah, so if you're that kind of learner, I'd encourage you to do that. But that takes us into part 4, talking about prophecies against kings and leaders. This is chapters 21 through 24. Chapter 22, we see the warnings against evil kings. Chapter 23, the condemnation of false shepherds, and then a promise of a righteous branch. This is where we see that messianic prophecy. The Lord is our righteousness, right?
Which is funny because Isaiah's already kind of said that same thing. He talks about, in Isaiah 11, the root of Jesse, the branch that will come from David. So it's Jeremiah... I don't know if Jeremiah was aware of Isaiah's prophecy. He probably was. And he kind of picks up that theme and runs with it and says, the Lord is our righteous branch, like you just said.
Yeah. Puts us into part 5, conflict with false prophets. That's going to be 25 through 29.
Yep.
Chapter 25, 70 years of exile.
There you go.
Is predicted. Chapter 26, Jeremiah is threatened with death.
Again.
Shocker. Chapter 28, conflict with the false prophet. Is it Hananiah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He dies.
Yes, he does. And then chapter 29, letter to exiles in Babylon.
That's the context of that,
the plans I have for you.
Plans I have for you verse. He's writing a letter to the ones that have already been sent away and says, you're going to be there for 70 years. But it's okay. Not in a physical sense. Another verse that comes to mind with that is James chapter 1. Count it all joy when you fall into various trials. Yeah. He's not saying, pretend that everything is okay. He's saying, you're going to make it.
Right.
Count it joy, not count it happiness.
Right, because you have the end goal in mind.
Right.
That's one thing that a lot of people don't kind of, I guess, wrap their heads around is that, you're not going to be happy when things are going well.
There's a bigger picture.
Yeah, things aren't going the way that I want them to right now.
Right.
In the context, this promise was, it was originally given to the exiles and during judgment, yet what he's doing is that he's promising the future restoration. He's promising that in the end.
Yeah.
Takes us on down to part 6, the book of consolation. Chapter 30, the promise of that restoration. Chapter 31 talks about the new covenant itself.
Right.
So yeah. Then that takes us to chapter 32. He buys land during the siege.
That's actually important because that's something that's brought up in the Gospels too. The field that he buys is used as a symbol later. So after Jesus is arrested, of course, Judas is the one who turns him over to the high priest and all the people who are going to end up killing him. Judas realizes that was a bad move, and Judas goes to the Pharisees and says, "Here's your money back, let him go." And the Pharisees are like, "Get lost." So Judas goes and buys a field and hangs himself. And that's the end of Judas' story. But it's specifically referenced in, I believe, Acts chapter 1, when Peter's looking back on that. It's referenced that's a fulfillment of the prophecy of Jeremiah buying the field during the siege.
Right. Yeah. Chapter 33, we get the Messianic hope. Like a king of David kind of was promised. Leads us to part 7, the fall of Jerusalem. 36, Joachim burns Jeremiah's scroll.
Oh, this makes me so mad. As somebody who would give an arm and a leg for so we don't have the autographs of any of the books of the Bible, which means we don't have the actual pieces of parchment that John was writing his gospel on. We don't have the original copy. Jehoiakim had the original copy, and he cut it up into pieces and he burnt it.
Yep.
I hate that guy. Anyway, it makes me upset.
He had a soap. It's fun. Chapter 37 and 38, Jeremiah is going to be imprisoned. Bummer. Chapter 39, Jerusalem falls.
Sometimes when you're reading Jeremiah, that's just how it goes. Man,
that sucks.
That's tough.
Chapter 39, this is when Jerusalem officially falls to Babylon.
Uh-huh.
They burn it to the ground, take all this stuff they want, and just leave.
Wiped.
Yeah.
Now, this part is when the history gets interesting, because this is when you have got Gedaliah the governor and everything that goes down there, starting in chapter 40, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
go ahead.
I'll give you the Luke Tatum Revised Standard Edition of the story. You got to know 3 people other than Jeremiah. You got to know Gedaliah, you got to know Ishmael, and you got to know Johanan. So Gedaliah is, okay, for context, channeling my inner Daniel. Josiah was the last good king. He had a scribe named Shaphan who was one of the people that helped him be the last good king and helped him with all the reforms. Shaphan's son is Ahikam's son is Gedaliah. Gedaliah is the grandson of Shaphan, the good scribe.
You got that? Good.
Gedaliah is the person who Nebuchadnezzar puts in charge. Technically, Nebuzaradan, who's the general from Nebuchadnezzar, puts him in charge, but he becomes the governor in Jerusalem. He doesn't have the same authority as a king. He's very clearly a subject of the Babylonian Empire this time, but he's in charge. He's good. We like Gedaliah. 2 people are sort of in his inner circle. There's Ishmael, and there's Johanan. Johanan we like at first. He's the one trying to save Gedaliah from Ishmael, because from the beginning, it's very obvious that Ishmael wants to kill Gedaliah and take his place as governor. It's written on his forehead practically, to the point that Johanan warns Gedaliah about it and is like, "Hey, buddy, you're going to die if you keep Ishmael in the inner circle." And Gedaliah, I've always kind of wondered about Gedaliah's motivations here, because it kind of seems stupid. It seems naive on his part to just keep Ishmael around. I do think there's some grace to be given in the sense that, Gedaliah just watched his people get wiped. He doesn't want to keep cutting off limbs if he can avoid it. So I think he's a picture of grace in that sense. Anyway, he keeps Ishmael in the inner circle, and Ishmael eventually kills him. So then there's the civil war between Johanan and Ishmael. Johanan ends up winning, and I said we liked Johanan at first. This is when we start not liking him, because Jeremiah finally... Nobody asks Jeremiah about any of this, because they're not that bright. But finally, after Gedaliah and Ishmael are both dead, Johanan's the last person standing. Johanan kind of sees the writing on the wall, except that's in Daniel, but anyway. He sees, okay, we're in a bad spot. We either stay here, and when the general of Nebuchadnezzar gets back, we have to tell him 2 of our 3 leaders are dead, or we go to Egypt. Now, it's very clear in the law of Moses, don't go back to Egypt for any reason ever. So, Johanan finally brings Jeremiah in, and he's like, what should we do? Should we stay here, or should we go to Egypt? And Jeremiah says, you should stay here, because the law of Moses says, don't go to Egypt. And then Yohanan and all the people say, we're going to go to Egypt. And we're going to arrest you, and if you try to stop us, we're going to kill you. And then they take Jeremiah with them, and that's how the history of Jeremiah ends, is with them getting to Egypt and Jeremiah basically saying, this was a bad idea, and it's not going to work out. Incidentally, none of the people that go to Egypt re-enter the Promised Land after the exile is over.
Did you get all that?
This is a podcast. You can listen to it multiple times.
Pause, rewind.
The point of that entire history is, again, the whole God is in control aspect. There are a lot of good messages in there about what good leadership looks like. Good leadership doesn't look like just taking the advice of the people around you. You have to take a stand at some point. It also doesn't look like waffling. You have to take a stand at some point. You've got to know what you're about. You've got to know what your priorities are. And there's also important things in there about the role of the prophet. So Jeremiah speaks what God wants him to say rather than what Jeremiah wants to say. Because before he says, like, don't go to Egypt, it's going to go really badly if you do that, you should stay here, he has a moment in there where he acknowledges, like, I don't really want to tell you this, partially because I know you're not going to follow it, and partially because it's really hard for me to say. Because I don't want to be stuck in this situation either, but we kind of have to be. And then they don't do what he says anyway. So there are lessons to be learned in all of that history, but I just think it's a good story too.
Don't go to Egypt.
Don't go to, well, the pyramids are cool. I've never seen them, but I've heard good things.
All right, so chapter 45.
Good one.
He writes the message to, is it Baruch? Is that how you say
it?
All right. Baruch was Jeremiah's scribe,
Mm-hmm.
followed him. I'm sure they were buddies. Leads us to part 8, the prophecies against the nations. This is chapters 46 through 51. This is where he starts like just dissing everybody.
Moab is terrible.
Yeah.
Ammon is terrible.
Egypt's terrible.
Babylon is the most terrible.
Edom, Damascus. They're just the worst. And so it kind of proves the fact that like God rules over everything, not just Israel. Part 9, this is kind of like just kind of like a historical appendix. Yeah. Kind of reviews the fall of Jerusalem. Goes back and talks about the temple being destroyed, and then Joachim being released from prison.
There you go.
He gets to live.
There's your preservation of the seed line.
Yada yada.
If you've been following the Old Testament all the way since Genesis, this is how God is going to preserve the line that eventually results in the Messiah.
And isn't that crazy? Like, it's a moment in history where they have no clue that they're making such a big part of history.
And Nebuchadnezzar has no idea.
They're making such a pivotal moment, and they have no clue what it's going to lead to. Not a clue. They don't.
Yeah, I don't remember if it's Nebuchadnezzar or if it's Ebel-Merodach. One of the Babylonian kings who's releasing Jeconiah from prison has no idea that he's allowing the Messiah to still happen.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Like, this actually reminds me. So it wasn't that long ago we were talking about the Islamic Empire and how it spread, and it got it like, so they went through northern Africa, they got into Spain, and they wanted Europe. They wanted Europe bad. Mm-hmm. They get to the eastern front of France, and there's this guy, Charles Martel. People called him. Do you remember what his nickname was?
No.
Oh, come on, you history nerd. You got to know.
I really don't.
The Hammer. His nickname was the Hammer. How
Which
cool
is like
of
the
a
nickname.
Right.
Yeah.
How cool of a nickname is the Hammer? Anyway, if it wasn't for Charles the Hammer Martel, the Islamic Empire probably would have taken all of Europe. If it was not for him and his company, they probably would have taken all of Europe. If they take all of Europe, do the colonies ever exist?
Right. You have no idea the impact that you make.
Like,
and like,
do we exist?
So
that's just crazy.
So pair that idea with the overall theme of Jeremiah. God is in control.
Yeah.
You never know the impact that you make. You also never know how God is using you to accomplish His purpose.
I never thought I'd ever use the Islamic Empire and the spread against Charles Martel as a
Bible podcast.
Yeah. No, I didn't think I would, but you know what?
Are.
You know what? Glad we did. Glad we did.
And that basically wraps Jeremiah.
It does.
There are other things we could talk about.
There's
we
a
could talk
whole
about,
lot of stuff we could talk about.
Jeremiah 31 is a huge passage. It's quoted twice in the New Testament in significant ways. One of them is when Jesus is born. When Jesus is born, Herod tries to kill Jesus by killing all of the infant boys in Judea, and when he does that, Matthew says this is fulfillment of what was spoken by Jeremiah in Jeremiah 31, where he said, "A voice is heard in Ramah and loud weeping, Rachel weeping for her children." So there's that, and then later in Jeremiah 31, there's a chunk of Jeremiah 31 that is basically block quoted by the Hebrews writer in Hebrews chapter 8 that talks about new covenant, I'll write it on their hearts instead of on stone. And the Hebrews writer weaves that into what he's saying to say the Christian covenant is what Jeremiah was looking forward to. He didn't know that. Like, again, the prophets don't know, hey, there's this guy, he's going to be named Jesus, he's going to come from Nazareth, he's going to do blah, blah, blah. But they know bits and pieces, and one of the bits and pieces that Jeremiah knows is the new covenant idea that Hebrews talks about.
Yeah, and you, like the Book of Lamentations is
Yes, that's also
heavily
Jeremiah.
attributed to Jeremiah. Key one from that is, correct me if I'm wrong. Hold on, give me a second. I'm not you. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. Great is thy faithfulness.
Yep.
The Lord is my portion, says my soul, therefore I will hope in him.
Were you singing the song?
A little bit.
Yeah.
In that pause, I was.
Yeah, that's Lamentations 3.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for calling me out on that one, by the
You're
way.
welcome.
But yeah, and I mean, again, there's like a whole slew of things we could probably branch off from this, just because. I mean, granted, we've done that a little bit, but we probably could do that a whole lot.
Question, and it's a question for the audience. Do you want us to do a full episode on Lamentations or just go into Ezekiel next time? Because Lamentations is short, but there's a lot of depth there.
Yeah.
So we can either do Lamentations or Ezekiel. It's up to you. You have 3 days. No, I'm just kidding. Just let us know.
Yeah, because we, like, with Lamentations, we could go, like, we could talk about what grief is. We could talk about what judgment is. We could talk about what mercy is. We could talk about hope and, like, all that. Yeah.
Talk about my favorite thing about Lamentations, which is that Lamentations is not the title.
What?
In the original Hebrew, Lamentations is not called Lamentations.
What's it called?
The original, I feel like this is a spoiler for the episode if we do it.
You want to hold on to it?
Yeah, I'll hold on to it. I'll tell you after we finish recording.
Okay, good. Because I'm the kind of person that, like, if you're like,
if
hey,
you want to know, let us know whether you want to do Lamentations or Ezekiel next. But there's your enticing trivia fact for Lamentations.
Yeah, you
could
definitely
also,
have to tell me after, because I'm the kind of person that if you don't tell me, I'm gonna, like,
you could also
I'll lose
just
sleep.
Google what I just said and probably find it. But it'd be more fun if you waited. I'm just saying.
Stupid Google. I love Google. Oh yeah.
So that's Jeremiah.
Why'd you just look at me like that?
I didn't know where to go with that.
Sometimes you're just mean.
Yeah.
I'm the mean one.
Yeah.
No, KT, you're...
No, KT, you're the nicest person I know.
We caught Luke lying on the podcast. Boom.
All right.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Look forward to figuring out what you want us to talk about next. Or if you don't want us to talk at all, just don't say anything, I guess.
That would be lame of you, though.
It would be. Riley, I'm expecting something from you. Yeah.
There's your shout out.
You get one. That's it. Nah, we love you, buddy. And everybody else. So, thanks again, and we look forward to talking to you next time.